Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. The farmers' protests in India are becoming endemic. Are they really protests or are they in fact a calculated political move? That's one question. The second is in a democratic setup, when one institution takes advantage and wants to rule over others, violating the constitutional guidelines, then that's a matter of concern. The recent Supreme Court judgment raises a number of questions and shows that the judiciary in India is trying to dictate to legislature and to executive. It's trying to be supra parliament and supra executive, which is not a bad thing, provided it's a dictatorship. And unfortunately, India doesn't happen to be a dictatorship. I'm very fond of saying that the way to hell is paved with good intentions. And the latest action of the Indian Supreme Court is a clear example of that. The noblest intention, no doubt, must have motivated the Supreme Court to take the initiative to resolve the farmers' agitation. Probably. And definitely now deciding to set up a committee to consider the laws and objections to them. Do you mean to say that the committee could not have set up the laws itself and taken a decision? It could have. The government was aware of all the things. However, in case the laws are unconstitutional, ultra virus, then the Supreme Court should have simply declared them null and void instead of this hedging exercise. The whole thing is fraught with dangerous implications. The court makes a mistake. It arrogates to itself the role of arbiter of politics and policy. The job of the Supreme Court is to settle matter of law. So, if the court was to consider the constitutional propriety of the legislature on agriculture, which is an item in the state list, or take dispute in the farm laws outside the ambit of the court, that would be absolutely, as the Muslim would say, halal, kosher. There's nothing wrong with that. That is justified. And Supreme Court has done no one a favor with its directive, stating that the operation of the three farm laws shall be stayed, setting up a committee to advise it on the propriety of law, directing all farm organizations to submit their views to the committee, which they refused to do. The whole judgment suffers from a number of flaws, and the common characteristics is extrajudicial trespass into areas of politics, policy, and legislation. Curiously, the courts have refrained from taking up the question of constitutionality, which they could have, but they have not done so. They have not made a judgment on the propriety of the central legislation on trade or the farm produce. They have not taken a decision on the conflict with the fundamental right of judicial review. This court seems to have forgotten that it's prerogative of the executive to formulate policy and frame laws. It's the job of the parliament to vet that policy and pass the law to enable the executive to carry them out. Any expert or philosopher or committee is entitled to give his or her opinion. But nobody can override the authority of the executive and the legislature to make policy and to legislate. The court, by setting up the committee to advise it on the viability and validity of the farm laws, has arrogated itself the power to second guess the government and the legislature and to superimpose its opinion on the will of the people. And the will of the people is expressed to the parliament. Parliament, the government can earn, and there the Supreme Court should come in. If the error is incompatible with the Constitution, declare the law null and void. However, dispute on the suitability of legally valid policy are in the arena of politics. People can object, and it's up to the government to meet the objection. The government and the farmers should figure out a viable strategy to crop diversification away from the unwanted blame instead of wasting time. And when the governments do not do so, then it is harmful. As a matter of fact, I was amazed that there has been an unmisplaced zeal on the part of the government. They pass a law in good sense, in good faith. But the court has been silent. Now, there's something amazing, which I'd like to point out. There is ordinances which are pending before the Supreme Court, where the constitutional point is involved. I am talking about the love jihad laws that blatantly violate basic liberty and fundamental rights of the people. And the Supreme Court is mum on that. They have not taken any action on that. As individuals, every judge is welcome to have sympathy with the elderly lawyer, farmers suffering from the cold, far away from the hearth and the home. But as judicial officer, it's not their job to find a compromise that would send the farmers home. Whether the government has been negotiating skillfully or not is not for the court to decide. Politics is the domain of the people and the government. Sometimes leaders make wrong calls, and then people hold them accountable when they do. And that is as long as no laws have been banned or broken. And if any protest breaks law. Now, secondly, the court says that it's a fundamental right of the people to protest. Agree. But your right ends where my rights begin. I was watching a TV show, Rajat show, and I was amazed at the villagers at the Singhu border have been unemployed and are suffering because the roads have been blocked, highways have been blocked, and the trucks are passing through the village and they have destroyed some houses. People were practically hell bent on crime. And that is where the agitation becomes directionless. One of my friends made a comment, and that is liable to be judged. That is simple. When Gurdeep Singh says it's not directionless, it is directionless. Yes, I agree with him that it is being directed by the Communist Party, it is being directed by the Congress Party, it is being propped up by AAP, but it doesn't know which side it's going. No agitation can be there where you are absolutely not liable to discuss. And they say, no, first accept our demand and then we'll discuss. Repeal the law. That's being directionless. Otherwise, they would have discussed it clause by clause, and whichever clause they don't want, that should be done. That should have been removed or could have been removed. Let's not deny one thing. The farmers and the governments have been talking, and there have been about 10 talks. And quite possibly there'll be other problems as well, as there's the problem of the tractor rally on the 26th thereafter or there before. There are many examples of protests achieving their demands fully or partially to protest, but they have a very demoralizing effects on the society, either because of the arrogance of the government of the day or the stubbornness of the agitating farmers, misconceiving the strength and weaknesses of the agitation. And that is what's happening with the farmers' agitation. In my articles and in my comments earlier, and I made 4 times the comments where I mentioned how hollow the whole base is. And when the people side say that they are no, there's another question. The common people who are not involved in the agitation, but who have an antipathy to the government, would call them these farmers andatas. I object to the word of use of andata. They are not andatas. Andata is the word destined by for the God who is a giver, if you believe in God. But this is an economic activity they are carrying on. They produce and they sell. It's just an economic activity. Why should they be sanctified as the givers of the food? They are not. They produce food the way carpenter would produce a chair and sell food. They are providers, but as, as an economic transaction. So they are not doing a favor. Let's be very clear. Yes, I fully agree. They should not be exploited. I fully agree that there's an important role to play. But then, which part of society does it have an important role to play? Do the doctors do not have an important play to play? Do the teachers do not have an important role to play? Do the traders even not have an important role to play? Each section of society, each vocation, each profession has its strengths and weaknesses. But to deify them, give them a godly status, is absolutely abhorrent. And they are directionless. Yes, they are directionless because they don't know what they're doing. Now, the comment by two friends, one Gurdeep Singh, when he said it's not directionless, yeah, I told him, yes, it's not directionless as far as the direction is concerned that to keep on agitating. But it's directionless because the end result, they are not so. In any agitation, the end result is subject to persuasion. Otherwise, it resembles a skin game, where ultimately both parties come to an agreement and they start where it started originally. There's a limit. Singh Jaspal made a very pertinent comment that the committee members are the same who have already been writing and giving opinion in favor of the laws. So they are not objective. I fully agree with that. Ashok was a person, Gulati, who originated the thought after Swaminathan committee, as I said, and it happened 20 years back. And these 20 years, the ideas have more crystallized in favor of these laws, not against them. So how could he be able to say ever? The whole thing smacks of absolutely non-application of mind by the judges. Now, the ongoing agitation began with great hopes, being one of the greatest in the recent times. And even the fence-sitters were hoping that some positive outcome would come. But as the time progressed, it became clearer that the leaders were losing the direction and agitators were getting trapped, bluntly speaking, in an anti Modi campaign with motives other than perceived farmers' interest. Because the main things have been accepted, MSP has been accepted. Assurances have been given the land shall not be taken, and they are ready to form a law for that. So, what's left? But simply, and then, Ambani has rightly said they have no interest in coming in this field at all. So the whole thing is being played in a way to impact Modi's image. One must not have forgotten that the agitation which began with the demand of protecting APMC and grantees for the continuance of MSP, those governments have been accepted right at the outset. The entire opposition, the so-called liberals, left intellectuals, academicians, felt that the agitation would screw Modi government. They felt the government would look the other way around, suppress the agitation. And the government did not suppress the agitation. People started calling him names. Modi kept quiet and is keeping quiet. Albeit initial reluctance, government behaved in a very positive manner. While engaging with the farmers in discussions, they changed the entire game plan, perceptions, outlook. And now the apprehension is that the government has almost accepted everything the farmers wanted except for the total repeal of the laws. No, is it not being directionless then? Farmer leaders are not able to understand and conceive at this juncture that they're losing a great opportunity of writing a golden chapter of the farmers' agitation of free India. And now in this connection, I'd like to point out that Communist Party, at the behest of Chinese, CPC, is possible, that is definite or not, might be motivating the creation of hysteria so that the new government or the present government cannot face the Chinese. In my comments yesterday, I talked about how Chinese create a hysteria as a war strategy. And this can be one variation of that. The comments and response to the former leaders suggest that they were prepared to accept several alternatives on 30th of December. But right the next day, it changed. Why? Because two chief ministers told them that we'll support you. And Mamta has called a session of the Bengal Assembly to pass a resolution condemning the laws. This is cheap gangsterism. Kejriwal sitting going there on the Singhu border again was in a bad taste. So it would not require any mental exercise to guess what transpired. The outcome of the four talks stood crafted on from 31st onward. But there was stubbornness, rigidity, and no desire to talk. There is a silver lining that the farmers have not stopped talking. They are talking with the two folk tongue. On the one side, they say, we will have no negotiations. First, withdraw the bills and then we'll go home. The second is, they still continue talking. But I would say that kudos, all the praise to the government, which still says positive and is hopeful of a sound settlement. Now, there are three issues. One, if the farmers do not come forward and go to the committee, would the Supreme Court declare the demonstrations illegal and hold the farmers responsible for contempt of court? If the Supreme Court can do that and send a couple of leaders to jail for contempt of court, this might solve. Putting on hold is not a bad idea. It helps you cool the temperature, but it's not a decision. Now, let's be very clear. 2 months the committee would take to come to a decision which is already known. They'll support the bills. And again, the agitation would start. Another thing, this is a time from Lodi to Bisaki when the people have the pre-cultivation work to do because all the cultivation and everything starts in spring. So if the farmers are here, then who is going to do the agriculture task? Evidently, the meaning is that's not the farmers who are here. It's somebody else posing as farmers. There might be some farmers who don't work. And that's why you see more elderly people because the elderly people would not be working there. They'll be sitting at home. So instead of sitting at home, why not come here and sit here? Few points made from the government side are worth noticeable and need to be taken up by the farmers. That the government has agreed to discuss the acts clause by clause. This is an excellent idea. Secondly, the acts are applicable to the farmers and stakeholders all over the country, but primarily the farmers of Punjab. And I was amazed that even the museum is there now. It's all reasonable. I would like appreciate that these government initiatives are accepted with grace. And acceptance of 2 out of 4 demands shows the spirit of negotiation with the government. Now, politically, the worst sufferer is going to be Akalida. It's caught in its dilemma. It finds nowhere to go. It cuts its mooring with NDA and deserted the government. And it was a politically miscalculation. It has its own regrets. And according to my feedback, they are finding a way out to come back. Sonia Rahul Congress is vomiting poison every day. Congress always tends to forget its deeds, especially how it handled the protest dissent of laws. You remember that? The shooting of the sadhus, orchestrating JP agitation at midnight police charge at Baba Ramdev. Not that I'm supporting those, but they were protest peaceful, and the way violence was created, firing was done, lathi charge was there. The history of Congress governance is riddled with suppressing agitations in a very cruel manner. On the other side, for more than 100 days, Modi government has not taken any action except one stupid action of Khattar government, which I called, shall I call it an action of a mini dire, I called him, yes, when he ordered the cannon, water cannons to be fired at, or the water shot at the agitators. But on the whole, as once they cross that Haryana border, there has been no provocation from the government. If settlement is not reached, then Akali Dal and the Congress would politically gain, as they would have to pledge to making allegations and attacks to the government and provide them with ammunition, which they are getting. But the fact is that the 3X remain well thought, well discussed, broadly accepted. They are, in fact, an active process of transformation. And let's not deny that any change is painful. So these are painful, but then they are necessary. The trade unions, you remember, protested vehemently against computerization. And today they accept them. When the banks were privatized, there was objection. But today, SBI and HDFC in India exist side by side and excel each other. As a common man, I have a few questions from the enlightened mind. Can the Supreme Court repeal or hold in abeyance and law passed by the elected government in the parliament? Is a law passed by the parliament against the constitution in any way unconstitutional? Can the Supreme Court make a subjective statement on how the negotiations were held? Do the farmers of Punjab and Haryana represent the whole India community? There are a couple of, I know, immediately you say there are farmers from Rajasthan and from Western UP and even from Maharashtra, a couple of them, say about 100 farmers from each state. But by and large, they are not there. And there were 25,000 farmers who said they want the laws in UP. And doesn't the Supreme Court, if they hold the law in abeyance, overstep in their role? Are they not going to set a precedence for all future laws passed by the parliament to be taken up simply because a group protests on the streets? Can the parliament ever pass laws which can keep all sections of society happy? Will the parliament continue passing laws within laws and constitutional limits? If that is so, then the Supreme Court judgment is absolutely stupid, uncalled for, unwarranted. And the agitation, as we have seen, and as I have discussed earlier, is absolutely directionless. And now is the time for the government to take and show its strength. Let it not be taken for granted. A government has to act also in the interest of those people who are living near the border and are suffering every day for the last 3 months. They have the same right of livelihood, of comfort, of dignity as these farmers have. Shall the government be capable enough to take action? Let's see and watch. Shall the Supreme Court recant its decisions, which is not possible, which is not going to happen? Shall the executive tell the Supreme Court that you're crossing the limits and the last time you're doing it, this might happen and should happen? But the situation is fluid and the directionless, meaningless agitation is causing havoc in the minds of the people. In the minds of the people, when they are agitated, then the society cannot be at peace. Thank you.